Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hive Taipei. So we will like to give an especial warm welcome for the new faces, as well as for those who are on live stream with us tonight. So to give you a little bit of idea of what we are a co-working space, and we have locations across 7 countries in APAC, with an aim to build and expand a community for entrepreneurs, creatives, and freelancers from all walks of life. So here at the Hive, we provide a variety of workspace membership, and we're also here to support you along the way for you to get your business established. And we also run events throughout the year which basically evolve around entrepreneurship, wellness, and networking. So if you would like to get to know more of the service that we provide here, please don't hesitate to come to us. My name is Wenny. I am one of the staff here at the Hive with a focus on event. And over there is my coworker Sabrina, who's our community lead, and finally our location manager Saki. Okay, so back to the topic. This is a new episode of the Experience series, and tonight we're very lucky and honored to have our special guest here with us. So she is the founder and CEO of Anchor Taiwan, with decades of experience in investment banks and hedge funds, who was also awarded as 40 under 40 as a woman in tech. So let's welcome Elisa Chiu. Thank you. Thank you, Elisa. So let's start from the very beginning. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and background in investment and as well as tech?
Sure. Well, it's really awesome to be back here. I was actually among the very first few people who came here when it was just being established. And Anchor actually hosted an event at one of Hive's Hong Kong locations before. So it means a lot for me to be back here, to meet with so many awesome faces, and we're so thankful to be here in Taiwan that during this tricky and difficult time, we still get to meet face to face. Obviously, still be careful and keep your distance whenever possible. But it's really my great pleasure. So tonight, I'm going to share a little bit about my experience, my journey, particularly more around my personal experiences throughout my career. Obviously, we're going to touch a little bit upon Anchor, from my job as a trader before, as a photojournalist. And to answer your first question, I first became a trader actually kind of when I was still doing my grad school in Toronto. How many of you are from the finance industry or doing investment related jobs? A few of you, okay. How many of you, anybody in the trading field? Wow, we have one, yes, and a female as well, woohoo! Yeah, I usually feel pretty lonely as a woman trader before, because usually on the trading floor, I was the only lady. So, but back then, when I was doing my grad school, my background was in economics. So I was an economist by trade, but then somehow I got lucky to get this job on the trading floor in Toronto at TD Securities. So when I first got the opportunity, I actually knew very little about the financial markets. It's not like I was passionate about stocks and bonds and I wanted to get into that field. I think I was basically passionate about a lot of quantitative models, and maybe because back then I wasn't sort of like dying to get a job as a trader. So during the interview, I wasn't really nervous. So the head of prop trading of fixed income, he was like this big guy and with this like really poker face. But during the interview, maybe because I just kind of feel like I was just there being myself, and I dared to ask questions. Maybe a lot of people were afraid of him, but I wasn't. So I ended up getting that job. I still didn't know much after I got the job. Initially, I thought, oh, maybe it's just kind of like playing video games. Because in my impression, as a trader, usually you work on the trading floor and there are like so many computer screens in front of you. So I learned a lot of things on the job. And basically, long story short, after that, before I finished my grad school, JP Morgan hired me and relocated me from Canada to Hong Kong. So I ended up staying in Hong Kong for many years, first for JP Morgan and afterwards for a buy-side hedge fund as a convertible bond trader covering all APAC. So basically, from all the way Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China, Singapore, all the way to India, Australia, and so on and so forth, basically trading multi-assets, focusing on convertible bond strategies, but basically covering a lot of different asset classes. So that's a little bit about, I guess, my background in investments.
Thank you. And Elisa, later on you moved to the US, to Silicon Valley. Could you tell us the story, what brought you there?
Sure. So I was in Hong Kong for many, many years. So basically, really, in the beginning, enjoy that intellectual challenge, like to really figure out what's going on in the world and to identify investment opportunities, and on the job to also try to make things more efficient. So I think because of that training, there's a lot of kind of like this automation and basically kind of like process-driven initiatives that I actually did back then. But then over time, gradually, I kind of feel like it doesn't seem like this is something that I wanted to do long term. Because when I look around, frankly, in my old world, a lot of people were not that fulfilled. And a lot of them kind of like they were doing the job because it was good package, good titles, and so on and so forth. And I think at the time, I also struggled a little bit in terms of connecting the meaning and the purpose of my life with my day-to-day job. As a trader, is basically tremendously high, high pace, and also a lot of stress and pressure, which I don't mind if I know clearly what I'm doing every day. But then I was sort of like losing that sense of purpose. So after quite a bit of consideration, eventually I decided to really step out of my comfort zone, quote unquote. I quit my job. And my parents, my boss, everybody was shocked. They were like, are you insane? You know so many people are trying to get into your job. But at the time, I was just really, really unhappy. So after 8 years in Hong Kong, I basically decided to take some time off to pursue my passion as a photojournalist, and specifically to get into more maybe some remote and dangerous communities to tell stories through my images. So I went traveling around the world, and eventually that brought me to Silicon Valley. So a friend of mine was doing her startup there, and then she was like, hey Elisa, you have been to so many places, you haven't been to Silicon Valley, you have to come here to check it out. And at the time, I wasn't exposed to all this tech, this innovation, this kind of stuff. So in my mind, I was like, San Francisco, yeah, I kind of remember the picture of Golden Gate Bridge and beautiful place, but maybe I can go there when I retire. That's, because I at the time, I was going to like India, West Bank, Israel, all of these like more exotic kind of like places, right? But then I had to transit somewhere from Latin America back to Asia. So I might as well stop over. So I did. And it was kind of like a mind-blowing time for me, being there relatively late during my career. But then I came across people, and also I went to a lot of really interesting events that opened up my mind and also my horizon. So that planted a seed. When I was deciding where to move to after Hong Kong, I decided to get myself to Silicon Valley because of the people that I met over there. I wanted to be closer to them to really understand how they look at the world. And also, Silicon Valley is a very interesting place. How many of you have been to San Francisco or Silicon Valley in general? Great. So, like a lot of people say that you go to Silicon Valley, obviously some people are probably from there, but very often people say that you go to Silicon Valley to find yourself or maybe to reinvent yourself. And over there, in addition to the mainstream tech culture, obviously there's also a lot of subculture, the Beat Generation, the hippies culture, Burning Man, and all of that. This really kind of like mecca center of tech and culture and a lot of self-discovery and exploration. So that was really a very important stage of my life, to be able to be there, to be so close to all these incredible people. So I still have a base in San Francisco, So basically, since 2014, I started establishing a base over there, and then later on, basically having this bi-coastal lifestyle.
So you're kind of like going back and forth. Cool. Okay. So, Elisa, you've worked many years as a former hedge fund trader before you start to pursue your passion as a photojournalism. And then eventually you moved to Silicon Valley. How would you sum up that experience? Like, what specific skills have you leveraged in these transitions into new fields? And how would you advise others to do the same?
That's a few big questions embedded in that. I would say, like if I were to look back, maybe the last 10 years or so, as from a hedge fund trader to a photojournalist to now what I'm doing as an entrepreneur and also investor in the tech and startup communities. On the surface, it might seem like, what? That's like so random. Like, they seem to be so different from each other and so on and so forth. But I would say overall, I think the very important and crucial point for an investor to have that acumen and also market sense is that fundamental sort of like curiosity about the world. So you need to really be curious about what's going on a macro and also macro level. I think every good investor should have that. And I think in my life, that's probably a universal thread throughout different job positions, different locations in the world, and so on and so forth. And I would say specifically, if we were to drill further down, I think this expertise or experience in finance, there's a type of language which is the language of the capital markets. So even though back then I was a late stage investor, so basically covering Pan-Asia for convertible bonds and so on and so forth, but then later on, when I was getting into, say, for example, as a photojournalist, I particularly care about more mission-driven type of endeavors and projects. So my background as an investor enabled a different route through impact investing to get into a lot of communities and also initiatives and financial engineering around that. And another side now with early stage investing, again, even though there's additional expertise and network and skill sets required at different type of investments, but I think that universal thread is still there. And another thing, I think, I remember my day one as a trader. We got into the trading floor usually really early before everyone else on the trading floor. And my first job, there was a manual, I was like handed over a manual this thick with SOP for what I was supposed to, rules that I was supposed to follow. I was sitting right next to that head trader who interviewed me. And I remember that every morning the first thing that I had to do was that I have to basically, based on that thick manual, there's specific rules about which screen should be placed where. So there's very, very detail-oriented and very process-driven because there's a lot of risk management that you need to take care of as a trader because every mistake can cost you a lot of money. And funny enough, when I was thinking about different skill sets or different sort of like traits that I carry through, everybody who has worked in my team at Anchor would know that we are very process-driven as well. We care a lot about SOP for things that we can standardize. Because I believe that this is probably the economist side of me speaking, efficiency. So whenever we find a way to do things more efficiently, then we will try to basically factor that into our manual so that next time we can do it quickly and we can save money and do it more efficiently. Another thing is that I think as a trader, it's very important to be able to think on your feet because the market is moving all the time and you might be making a mistake here or and that immediately can cost you a few $1,000s, if not a lot more. But then you have to be able to stay calm and still kind of like think about what's the best thing to do now. And I think as a photojournalist, especially at some of the very tricky and dangerous places, and now as an entrepreneur and also investors navigating in the tech ecosystem, it's a different type of pressure. But I think being able to coexist with that and being able to sort of like turn that into some positive force is probably something that's sort of like building in me already, being trained as a trader and investor for many, many years.
Wow, sounds super fascinating. Elisa, you mentioned your team Anchor just now. Could you tell us more about Anchor Taiwan? What do you do?
Sure. I'm curious, actually, for the audience here, who has heard of Anchor before tonight? Okay, great. We have quite a few friends, and I see some familiar faces, so great to see you. I started Anchor Taiwan in 2017, and I can go on and on and on to talk about Anchor, because this is really what I'm truly passionate about. But long story short, essentially, Anchor Taiwan is a platform to bring the world with Taiwan through entrepreneurship, focusing on a lot of connecting the world with Taiwan and also connecting corporates with startups. And specifically, there are three major things that we do. The first thing is that from 2017, we run entrepreneurial residencies and innovation sprints, business boot camps. Essentially, we identify international tech professionals, entrepreneurs, and investors. We bring them physically, before this year, to Taiwan. Obviously, this year we cannot do that. But then usually, we bring them here to Taiwan. And based on their needs and interests, we connect them with the industry or the talents or the communities here in Taiwan. So very often, they might be here looking for manufacturing partners, looking to build a team, looking for investors, partners, and so on and so forth. Sometimes we have business or political leaders coming here looking for maybe inspirations or technology solutions. And we have some very interesting bus out there. Yeah, so that's the first part of what we do. A lot of people will know us through that program because very often when we run these cohorts, we will have relevant events in Taiwan as well. We care a lot about integrating these people with the communities here. So we run a lot of events based on usually the expertise of the people from that cohort. So from blockchain to future mobility to IoT, O2O, and so on and so forth. The second part of what we do is that we do quite a bit of corporate engagement, consultancy, and execution. So usually, these corporates are interested in working with us for two reasons. Either they have some sort of goals or plans that they want to basically expand internationally, so utilizing our existing network and expertise for cross-border expansion. So say, for example, Taiwanese corporates interested in leveraging us to go abroad, or international brands hoping to land in Taiwan. And through that, sometimes we do it through a form of events. So this can be, say for example, these days, especially online webinars. Previously, it can be real kind of like physical events. And a lot of strategy, sort of like planning together with our corporate partners. The last part is our early stage investments. That part is relatively new, so we started Anchor Venture Partners in 2019. Essentially, the goal is that we're bringing all of these amazing entrepreneurs here. And if we can also be their early strategic investor, then we have further skin in the game. And at the same time, when they grow exponentially, then we also get to basically be part of that journey together. And we thought that would be a pretty awesome win-win outcome. So those three segments, the first one, a lot about program and events. The second one, a lot about startup corporates, kind of like engagement. And the last part is about early stage investing.
So with the program, how is Anchor Taiwan helping those startup and entrepreneurial community?
I tend to be very careful with the word help. I might still use that word sort of like unintentionally and just in our daily language, but I often feel like, because very often I come across people, especially overseas Taiwanese, and with great intention, and say, hey, Elisa, you know, like, I want to help the Taiwanese ecosystem, and what can I do? Are you hiring? Because I really want to help. And I think, first of all, let's think about this word, help. Because I think that word implies that you know more, or you have something to offer, and you know how to help. Well, very often that's actually not the case. So we actually try to be very, very intentional and careful when it comes to using that word help. Because I think the community and ecosystem is a very complex thing. We can do things that we think are helpful, while sometimes it may not be, or sometimes it might be helpful for some, but harmful for others. So I think we actually care a lot about, first, can we learn together while we figure out the best way to help? Again, very careful with that word. So I think throughout our experience from 2017, step by step, we're doing a lot of experiments. We try to bring what we think will provide a net positive impact for the ecosystem. But then I still don't think that we have 100% the right answers yet. But I think ultimately what we believe in is that we really believe that the most difficult issues that we're facing in the world requires a lot of cross-border collaborations. And we believe that a lot of these cultural differences actually is some of the best foundation for innovation. And we believe that if we have better conduits and platform to enable that kind of collaboration, then the world is going to be a better place. So a lot of the events that we run has something to do with, okay, this entrepreneur or investors, maybe they have certain perspectives or certain technology that they're working on. Can we bring them here so that they can exchange their thoughts with the local entrepreneurs? A lot of time, it's about injecting these external stimulations and basically see, like what that will bring us. This is not about telling you, hey, this is the Silicon Valley way. You should do it this way, because I don't think that's the right model. So that's a long answer, I guess, to your question. But then very often, I feel like with our program and also our event and our mission overall, I feel like this is very much a co-creation process. Our program is not complete until it's probably never complete actually, because even though we do have the schedule sort of like events and so on and so forth, when our entrepreneurs are in our program, every day their interaction, what they bring to the table is part of the experience, part of the program for us and also for our local community. And even after they have graduated from the program, because they stay in the alumni community, so it's an organic kind of like thing that grows forever. Yeah, and even with our local communities, we try to use the same way to approach that. So I think it's important to stay humble. And even these days, a lot of time when we engage with the corporates, when we are talking about digital transformation, what does that actually mean? Like without being, say for example, at the factories, talking to a lot of people who have been working there for a long time, how do you really help before you truly understand? And I think we're still trying our very best to understand a little bit more.
Elisa, you've lived in so many different places. You've lived in Canada, you went to grad school there, and you live in Silicon Valley in the US, and you work for a long time in Hong Kong and now Taiwan. So you used to work as a trader, and you used to work as a photojournalist. You have so many different experiences. And what was it about those collective experiences that made you realize the importance of cross-cultural knowledge?
Culture is a very tricky thing, huh? Like, what does that even mean? Like, how would you define culture? I often feel like culture is crucial. We all feel like, it's important. But then it's also very subtle and also very difficult and hard to have a business model. But I think, we do embrace the importance of culture, and I can give you a few examples in terms of why we think it is very important for us. If you get my name card afterwards, you will see culture is actually one of the key words on our name card, even though, externally people might know us as more of a corporate startup engagement and investment and so on and so forth. But culture is a very crucial element. And it's because through my past experience, I think a lot of what we do, this cross-border kind of like communication or overseas, trying to tell people what Taiwan is all about, has a large element with storytelling. And it almost doesn't matter what you do these days. That's a very crucial skills to have. But storytelling on the cross-border basis involves not only translation with the language, so like from Mandarin to English or German or so on and so forth, but also translation culturally. I'll give an example. I was actually just chatting with a friend this afternoon, and we were talking about this case. So I remember in 2017 when we brought over the first cohort of our entrepreneurs, we brought them to meet with, at the time, CTO of Lai'an, Guangbao Jituan. So for those from Taiwan, you're probably familiar with Guangbao. Wow, like a listed companies, pretty powerful, and they used to be the biggest manufacturers for mouse and CD-ROMs and so on and so forth. But then when you go around the world, chances are, when you tell people, hey, guess what? I just met the CTO of Lai'an. People be like, huh? What on? So basically, I think a lot of time it involves, if I were to explain this to, let's say, someone from the Silicon Valley, how do I explain to that person with different sort of like cultural setting and different sort of like lives and all these different conditions? If you know, like a lot of people from the audience have been to Silicon Valley or maybe are from Silicon Valley, so you're probably familiar with Caltrain, right? Like that very important, not as fast as our high-speed rail, but a very crucial method to basically move between San Francisco and South Bay, Silicon Valley. But probably not a lot of you know that along the Caltrain, above that train, the lights, a lot of the lights and also the smart street lights in the United States are actually manufactured by Lai'an. So I think, like having different experiences from different parts of the world so that you can have this kind of additional translation is key when it comes to when you want to tell others about the relevancy of certain things. I think I can tell you tons of stories around that in terms of, say for example, some story really excites the local Taiwanese. But then if you simply translate that word by word into English, like a lot of time our entrepreneurs are like, no feeling. So a lot of our job involves, okay, how do I find that thing that they will be able to relate? Another quick example, very often over the weekend we'll take our entrepreneurs and investors outdoor. And then one place that we love going is near Zhoufen. So we'll go to Teapot Mountain for hiking, say for example. And then when we stand there, so we tell people about, oh, guess what? Like here, hundreds of years ago, there's a gold rush here, and this is the history. We'll bring you to the museum, and so on and so forth. But like people might be like, okay, great. But if you tell them, hey, guess what? Okay, now in front of you, this is Pacific Ocean. Why don't you close your eyes and imagine, like if you go all the way this direction, the other side of the Pacific Ocean, that's Silicon Valley, that's San Francisco. Around the same time, hundreds of years ago, when there was gold rush here, around the same time, there was also a gold rush in San Francisco. There, afterwards, there were Levi's and all this history, there was this like parallel universe. So immediately, that creates a different setup. So that's just kind of like another example in terms of like, we think a lot about this, and I think it's so fun, actually. I really enjoy this process because then you find all of these different nuances and stories that you can basically weave into things that people can relate. And obviously, another huge part about the importance of cross-cultural differences is when you conduct business, especially internationally, you need to take these cultural nuances into consideration. Otherwise, when you are doing your business developments, like just one small thing might ruin a deal for you. So That's on the practical level, the importance of understanding different cultures.
Was there any sort of instance where you've successfully connected someone in Taiwan and someone, let's say, in Silicon Valley or elsewhere, and that really kind of like demonstrate the potential in what you mentioned for maybe multidisciplinary or cross-cultural collaboration?
Sure. Since 2017 till essentially 2019, because this year we couldn't run any physical programs, we have done 10 cohorts, long and short. And so far, 60% of them, we have got entrepreneurs or investors that have cross-border sort of like soft landing. So either, like the entrepreneur decided to move to Taiwan to set up a team, or to move to Taiwan to join another team, or find manufacturing partners, and so on and so forth. And I think one recent example would be in November last year, we had an entrepreneur, her name is Farah, and she was named by the Obama administration as one of the top emerging entrepreneurs. Her family, she was kind of like second generation immigrants, and her family was originally from Haiti. So her startup ideas has always been more mission driven in the renewable energy space, and afterwards in the internet accessibility space. She had never been to Asia before she joined Anchor, but specifically she wanted to come here looking for a manufacturing partner after she got investments. And she wanted to come here specifically because she feel like it's more trustworthy, and security-wise, she feel like she feel more comfortable looking for Taiwanese partners. So when she was here, basically we connected her with a lot of local entrepreneurs. A Canadian entrepreneur specifically introduced the manufacturer that he used. Then later on, there were a lot of conversations and also different matchmaking sessions that we also organized with other manufacturers as well. So through that program, she identified a few manufacturers to work with. One of them actually ended up becoming her kind of like advisor and potentially a co-founder. So stories like this, I think we're lucky in the sense that very often we have people who come to us and say, hey, Lisa, like your team and Anchor Taiwan changed my life. Because sometimes when they meet a co-founder here, they might end up moving here. That completely changed the trajectory of really their life. And I think because of this feedback loop, very often we feel like, wow, we still, and last month, even like last few days, I actually just met with someone who recently also moved to Taiwan after joining our program last November as well. So constantly, we're very happy and very thankful that because of the team, because of our partners, collectively, I think Taiwan means something different for these people. Either they come here or they go back to their original communities. They bring back part of Taiwan with them so that more people know about the awesome stuff here.
Wow, what a story. So next question we're going to ask you is, you've started the Anchor Venture Partners in 2019. So for Anchor Venture Partners and the strategic investment aspect of Anchor Taiwan, what are the general things that you look for in business that's worth investing in?
Sure. I think I will probably answer more specifically from the Anchor's investment thesis, because the general consideration as an investor, I think there's a lot about, it's about the team, it's about the market potential, whether you can scale, and so on and so forth. We can leave that with maybe kind of like a different conversation, or if you want to know more, I'm happy to share more around that as well. But specifically with Anchor Venture Partners, what we believe in is that, as I mentioned, we believe a lot in cross-border collaboration. And so basically, part of our investment thesis is to invest in hybrid teams. What do I mean by that? Is that we believe that in a team, if we have people, and very often with different cultural and educational and work backgrounds, that some of them, probably usually the CEO, have the capacity of international go-to-market and also fundraising experience or capacity with a very solid engineering and design team. Usually that's a very good combo. So when we look at basically the teams that we invested into, usually that falls into this kind of setup. And when I say hybrid team, it doesn't mean that, oh, I need to have a very narrowly kind of like defined foreigner with a local. So obviously with foreigners, with basically a local team, we love to see that. But then even with, say for example, overseas Taiwanese that have different cultural and educational experience coming back to work with maybe like local entrepreneurs or local engineers, I think very often we see really good results. Like even when we look at the current landscape in Taiwan in the tech sector, a lot of successful startups, you can actually see this kind of hybrid team setup already. And we believe that this is actually a very good formula to replicate and also that's aligned with the overall mission with Anchor as well.
Thank you. Next, can we pick your brain on Taiwan's current tech scene? So when it comes to the, let's say, the potential and strength in Taiwan's tech industry, what is our biggest asset that foreigner countries may not see? Just that.
Yeah, I think there are two parts. One is the more general sort of like elements. So our freedom, democracy, great infrastructure, cost of living, and all of these are great elements that I think foreign entrepreneurs, even corporates or investors can take advantage of. But I think in addition to that, Taiwan has something pretty specific, and I call it the supply chain boosted innovation ecosystem. And what I mean by that is that when you look at the economy of Taiwan, we have very solid traditional industries. A lot of time we call a lot of these corporates or companies hidden champions here in Taiwan. You may not have heard of their names at all. They might be these small companies making screws, but then they're making kind of like billions and billions of NTD every year. So we have a very solid, these traditional industries. We also have a very, very strong ICT supply chain. So, like a lot of from TSMC, Foxconn, Quanta, Wistron, and so on and so forth. So I think if we were to look at Taiwan, compared with a lot of other ecosystems in the world, this is actually pretty unique. And I think we should leverage on this more. And how? A lot of these companies are actually sitting on a lot of cash. A lot of these companies are also facing a lot of challenges when it comes to transformation and staying relevant. So we're not 100% perfect yet when it comes to being very progressive and risk-taking and all that yet. However, I think more and more of these corporates realize the importance of working more with startups and going more international so that they can basically turn the entire global startup ecosystem as their R&D labs. So a lot of this very powerful traditional industry and ICT sort of like corporate players, I think are on the journey of, I call it, from the sell side to the buy side. Because previously, Taiwan used to be, like we are very, very good at being the OEM and ODM. So basically manufacturing for others. But then sitting on a lot of cash. And also, if you want to really get into that top tier innovation sort of like battlefield, I think turning from sell side to buy side, and these days we're seeing a lot of CVCs being set up, investment sort of like initiatives, that's actually a very good way to participate in the global international innovation ecosystem. And I think when we look at the tech and startup ecosystem here, that's a very important force because these people, they potentially can be not only your manufacturer, your clients, and also your strategic investors down the road. So I would say for entrepreneurs both locally and also internationally, that's probably an element to really pay very close attention to.
Thank you, Elisa. We're almost running out of time, but now we'll open the ground for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to let us know and we'll pass the mic to you.
Hello, Elisa. Yeah, nice to hear your voice again.
Great to see you.
Sorry, my name's Andrew. Okay, Taiwan is at the start of a very interesting phase in time. And we're not really sure what's going to happen, but things seem to look pretty good. From my little 2-cent work that I do in entrepreneurship and business here, I get an enormous amount of inquiries of people who are about to back up lock, stock and barrel from in America and move over here or from their home countries. What, from your perspective, how do you see the next 2-3 years? What do you think is going to happen with Taiwan, business-wise?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer.
Yes, but you're so much higher than me. I'm down here.
Come on. I can share a few cents, but I genuinely don't have the answer. I can have a few guesses, because frankly, recently we have been thinking a lot around this. Because Taiwan so far has done such an amazing job battling COVID. So we almost live in this parallel universe, right? Like very often when I have Zoom calls with my friends or partners and also business contacts from around the world, it's like they cannot imagine having this. And it's probably not gonna happen. It's not like a month. It's probably 6 months or even longer. So to be honest, how the world is going to be with all of this, I really wish I had the wisdom and the answers. But I would say what I started thinking a lot about is that the fact that we have done such a great job so far, I think that's great, that's worth celebrating. But at the same time, I think it's also important to stay cautious. Because without that experience of kind of like being isolated and working completely remotely, we miss the opportunity to imagine or to participate in potentially some very important business model for the next decades. So I think number one is I will encourage you to also think more. Like now, is this sustainable? Because Taiwan, after all, is a very export-driven economy. So sooner or later, it's going to hit us, right? And then are we going to miss that new business model affecting the majority of the population in the world? I think that's the number one thing, because our talents, we're not working remotely as much. So that means we're not being trained with the tools, with the mindset, with the process. Is that creating a gap between our talents and the global workplace? And are we really missing a lot of business opportunities? So I think the fact that we're doing a great job, that's great. But at the same time, I think it's also important to think more around this. And I think specifically when it comes to entrepreneurs moving here, obviously I love seeing that. I also think it's very important to dive a little bit deeper, because now we have this influx of a lot of great talent, either overseas Taiwanese or foreigners trying to really get here. How do we ensure that they integrate well with the local communities and have that right platform for mutual sort of like understanding and trust? I think longer term, if we want to have a more international society, that's actually very important to think through, because you cannot presume that we just put these people together and they will just kind of like love each other and work well, because there are, again, a lot of cultural differences that you need to consider. And then how do we ensure that these outsiders, newcomers, actually, one, obviously, hopefully they're well received and welcome, but at the same time, they also have the right mentality to integrate with the local communities. So I think with what's going on in the world, those are a few things on top of my mind. I don't know if I answered a little bit to your question because I really do not know what the business is gonna be like. Again, we can talk in general about AR, VR, 5G, and all that kind of like stuff. But the reality is that I don't know. It's gonna be very different, and I think the change, we're probably gonna face that maybe kind of like 3 months at a time. Because 3 months ago, now it's like August, right? 3 months ago, do you feel like at the time you could foresee that Taiwan is like this and the world is still like that? Like frankly, I think this is a very difficult time to make any prediction. So, sorry to disappoint you.
Any other questions?
Hi, how you doing? My name is Ivan. I'm also in venture capital, but not in Taiwan. But I've been in Taiwan since January and just got kind of involved in learning more about the technology ecosystem here. So from your perspective, that you've worked in both the Valley and here for many years in entrepreneurship, what is, Taiwan is such a small domestic market that it can't, all the entrepreneurs in here cannot depend on the domestic market to grow, to scale. And so what does Taiwan entrepreneurs and what support do they need where they can expand into the international market so we can have future big brands, big companies in the tech world that are multinationals instead of, which we really don't have any right now? I mean, what would entrepreneurs do and what support would they need to make that happen?
Sure. I tend to look at this from two categories. One is the B2C type of startups, and the other is the B2B type of startups. So I think for B2B in Taiwan, you will see maybe like experienced executives or like very experienced engineers from big ICT firms. And after working for several years, they decided to basically come out and start their own startups because they understand the pain points. They have already got the context and expertise, so they can actually really start more of the B2B type of startups. In my opinion, those kind of startups actually have pretty good potential in scaling internationally, because like especially depending on the verticals, but let's say for manufacturing or like a lot of this like more enterprise level kind of technology and solutions, I think those part I see more potential to scale internationally. B2C, I think, is a little bit trickier because the reality is that, let's say if I've never lived in the States, and when people tell me about, I don't know, like, when people tell me about, like, I wouldn't even have a sense in terms of the distance or anyhow like targets. Like, I'd be like, what? Like, it's hard to really imagine when you don't have that kind of work-life experience. So for B2C, I think for Taiwanese startups to be successful, there are probably two relatively, I'm not sure if easy is the right word because it's pretty difficult, but I would say probably two routes. One is you need to find partners, co-founders that have this kind of experience in your target markets. Because the reality is, if Mark Zuckerberg was born in Taiwan, I'm sure there will be no Facebook because our internal domestic market is simply not big enough. So I think it's important for young people to recognize that we're born here, this is our size of our domestic market. And there is a limit with expansion of that B2C market. Until you can break that boundary, it's impossible for you to further scale. So number one is look for either, say for example, foreign entrepreneurs or overseas Taiwanese that have the work-life experience overseas. Another thing is probably about the capacity of expanding internationally, which is actually not that easy, but it's not impossible. Look at our parents, look at our grandparents, all these hidden champions. How many countries they have done business with? And I think if you are able to identify, say for example, the right local partners in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the States, and I think that would be the key for you to be able to target that B2C market. So, and I think in both areas, there's probably still quite a lot that can be done. in the tech ecosystem here.
Hello, my name is Fabian. I used to be an entrepreneur, but right now I'm retired because my industry right now doesn't exist, like international trade shows, but whatever. Here I am and having my enforced sabbatical now, so it's great to be here. Thank you for your speech.
Awesome.
And my question is going, actually, I was doing business for quite a few years in mainland China, and you were just talking about all those firms. The business model, as I understand it, or I see for a lot of those companies, was having your workbench in mainland China, almost zero language barrier, and even before COVID-19, like even before the trade war, this kind of supply chain environment thinned out and gradually moved to Southeast Asia. So when we talk about going internationally, how do you integrate that into your network, or what responses do you see how to develop that a step further, so that's maybe Southeast Asia in the future is going to be a part of this network? Thank you.
Can I get a little bit of information about, your question is more about how to expand into Southeast Asia, or how to incorporate which part?
Well, talking about ICT firms, what I heard from a few friends is basically it's harder and harder to find reliable suppliers in mainland China as it used to be, because they're all gone, or how to say used somewhere else. So the main selling point for a lot of those companies like B2B is gone, because you can go direct and you're not building that bridge anymore. So and I think that used to be one of the very successful parts of the business model here in general in Taiwan. And do you see that actually as a big risk, or what responses do you see, to cope with that situation?
Okay, so let me try to see if I understand this question correctly. So what I'm getting is that previously, maybe for B2B, especially when it comes to the manufacturing sector, there were a lot of opportunities in China. But because of trade war, because of COVID, a lot of them are moving to Southeast Asia, or maybe they disappear. So how do either entrepreneurs or corporates basically cope with that change? Okay, so here's my take. I think for Taiwan, obviously China is probably relatively easier because of the similar language and, depending on who you ask, shared culture and historical background. So it's relatively easier for Taiwanese business people to establish their business over there. But as you correctly pointed out, a lot of that is changing, and very rapidly. My sense is that a lot of these Taiwanese entrepreneurs, they are already adapting. So a lot of these are also moving towards Southeast Asia. And we're seeing that already. A lot of big ICT firms are establishing their presence in Vietnam, in India, in the Philippines, and Indonesia. And I think, in a way, for Taiwan, all the way, I think, because we're small, so very often what we basically provide and put on the table is actually the know-how, and we did that in China, and I think now we're actually seeing a lot of that when it comes to either building factories or manufacturing into Southeast Asia. So I think I'm already seeing that happening, and I think the key is, instead of getting caught up with US and China, think more when it comes to how to join forces to basically expand the pie of the emerging markets. So yeah, I don't know if there is like something specific that you're curious about when it comes to.
Well, to close the circle, excuse that I'm not so well prepared and don't understand so much about your network, like about Anchor, but is that something actually you would consider to integrate into your network, to intensify the connection with those countries or those regions?
That's a good question. We've been thinking a lot around that, because previously our strongest linkage is in between US and Taiwan, and probably to a certain extent Canada as well with Taiwan. We have got actually alumni from more than 15 countries, but US and Canada and Taiwan are our strongest sort of like connections. But with the change and also working more and more with the supply chain partners here, obviously we're seeing that shift into Southeast Asia. There is still a huge importance with the US, especially when it comes to ICT, semiconductor, and so on and so forth. But it is indeed an area, and we're looking into that pretty closely, actually, trying to really identify what's the best sort of like strategy ourselves as well. Do we work with existing VCs over there, or do we, like, which government ministry should we collaborate with to make this happen? So I don't have a detailed answer yet, because this is kind of like a moving plan, a moving proposal that we are basically putting together. But I do believe that that part is going to be very important. However, I would say a huge part going forward is probably a lot about, for our existing, or maybe for the supply chain's existing clients in the States and in Europe, how to position Taiwan as a conduit for them into Southeast Asia. So previously, a lot of time, we're a good conduit into China, but now can we serve similar purpose for the European and US clients? And I think if we can figure out how to really do that efficiently, I think, you know, like, the opportunities are really endless over there.
Hi, my name is Janet, and I'm an Asian American from Seattle, and I moved to Taiwan last year. And I'm just wondering, so being a woman of color yourself, like, how did you cope with that if you were like the only one on the trading floor? And a follow-up to that is, did you ever suffer from imposter syndrome? And if so, like, how did you overcome?
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah. I would say, well, first question, I think my industry somehow usually has been more male dominant. So from the trading floor to even now, actually in tech industries, today actually we have a pretty good gender balance, I would say. But sometimes it's not like this. So I think I still remember when I my first job as a trader on the trading floor, being a minority and also an immigrant. And at the time, I was basically still relatively new to North America. It could be, frankly, pretty tough. And even over the years, frankly, even now, sometimes I still battle with that. I don't know for the ladies here, whether you have this kind of experience. So I'm the CEO and the founder, and then, you know, like, very often we meet either existing business partners or new business contacts. But very often, when you talk to them, either in meetings or even just during conversations, they naturally will look at the guys and not you. I'm still trying to find good ways to fight this. I like, and sometimes I'm like, why, like, and some of my friends was like, oh, don't worry, you know, like, they just don't dare looking at you, or, you know, like, to try to find some sort of justification. But frankly, I think even now, and I think in Taiwan, we're relatively fortunate, because here, I feel less sort of like suppressed as a woman, and I think we're free to really kind of like more to pursue the business opportunities and so on and so forth. But even now, I still battle with that. So I think the key is I try not to let that get in the way. So I acknowledge that this is not perfect, and I don't like it. And I try to ask, whenever I come across sort of like mentors or like more senior ladies, I ask them, hey, you know, how do you deal with that? Or do you also face that as well, or is it just me? And I encourage all of the guys to pay attention. Next time, when you talk to a group of people, because I feel like maybe they're not conscious, maybe they didn't realize that this creates an impact on the other side. You know, like, so all the guys, you have homework, okay? Like, go home. Next time, a business meeting or even casual meeting, make sure the eye contact. Don't only look at guys when you talk. Yeah. So I think that's the first thing, because we need guys to be a part of this to make it better. And I think your second question, yeah, definitely. But I think I try to see that as sort of like a drive for me to stay humble. I try to remember to celebrate small steps, not just for myself and also for Anchor as a team and as a platform. But at the same time, yeah, I constantly feel like, oh man, I suck. Or like, oh, like I could have said that. I could have done this. But at the same time, you know, like I basically, and you know, with Anchor, where's my team, James? We are like huge fan of not just SLP, but also every event, every cohort, every cause, every whatever. We always have a review session, and we always document all of this. And I think while sometimes I constantly feel like, oh, maybe I'm still not good enough, but then I try to use that as a force for improvements. And also, maybe this is a secret to share, because I realize that I might have that issue. And I constantly need to remind myself that, hey, you got to kind of like believe in yourself and move on and basically keep shining. So I started doing one thing, and maybe I can share with you who share that similar obstacle. I put on my calendar, I think I have like maybe 3 times or twice per day, that say for example, like I think 8 o'clock in the morning and maybe 8 o'clock at night, and I put you are enough on my calendar reminder. So every morning, 8 o'clock, I'll see you are enough. And I think, yeah, sometimes it's just kind of like a great reminder. Like at that moment, maybe it's just a split second, especially when I'm busy. Maybe it's just a split second for me to see that. But sometimes it's just kind of like a quick reminder that, hey, yeah, you know, I've got this. Yes.
I'm crying.
Quick question. Hi, Lisa. Thank you for coming. You are enough. I'm James. I'm from Los Angeles. I've been to Beijing the last 2 years and now end up in Taiwan. I want to know if you could, in few sentences, what is a profile of a Taiwanese entrepreneur that you're looking for as Anchor? And you mentioned earlier that you're looking for diversity, but what would it look like in simple terms? Yeah.
Well, first of all, because we work actually a lot with international founders, international entrepreneurs. So that's actually in our program, we have more international entrepreneurs in the Anchor cohorts. But we do interact with a lot of Taiwanese entrepreneurs through our ecosystem events and so on and so forth. So if I were to, say for example, pick Taiwanese entrepreneurs to invest in, number one, they need to have this ambition and goals to build something that can scale outside of Taiwan. And I think, well, number one, that ambition sometimes is not given. Because I think sometimes the beauty of Taiwan is also the thing that makes it harder to expand. Because, you know, like you probably have come across your favorite 小吃摊 or snack store like at the night markets. You know, like every day they will just sell 200 bowls, and afterwards sold out. Sorry, you know, even if they can make more money, I want my good life or whatever. Like they have different pursuit, different philosophy. So sometimes that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not suitable for venture investment. So I think if you are looking for venture money, then you need to first have that kind of ambition. So again, in Taiwan, very often that's not a given. So especially compared with maybe young people from Beijing, they have more of this like 狼性, right? Like, yeah, here is, again, there's no absolute kind of like better or worse, but it's just a reality. And then once you have that kind of drive and goals and ambition, whether you have the plans and skill sets to practically do that, or like the products that you built, whether it actually caters to a broader market outside of Taiwan, I think that's also another really key factor that I look at.
Thank you all for all the great questions. So we're about to close this session for now, but please feel free to stay and mingle for a little bit. We'll be selling drinks at the bar. And finally, Elisa, is there anything that you would like to add or say?
Well, I feel, I really enjoyed the session. I hope you do as well, because, very often we are the host of the events. And tonight I kind of feel like, I gotta come here and being taken care of, and seeing some familiar faces and a lot of new faces, and then hopefully after this get to enjoy a drink. So I really enjoyed this session, and thank you so much for coming. And I think each one of you is what makes Taiwan a great place, what makes the Hive and also Anchor great communities in the entrepreneurial sort of ecosystem. And I would say, basically, if you're curious about what we do, feel free to obviously follow us. These days, it's pretty easy to find where we are. And if you want to connect with me, feel free to come and talk to me. If we don't get to chat in person, if you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It would be easier if you want to send me a quick note telling me that, hey, this is where we meet. It's easier for me to accept your invitation. And then if you want to check out some of our community events, feel free to check out our Facebook. We also will continue with our mission to connect the world with Taiwan through entrepreneurship. And I think there's probably going to be more initiatives, especially when it comes to our involvement with the capital markets. So this is kind of like a full circle. I kind of feel like back then I escaped kind of from the Wall Street world on the very traditional finance. But sometimes I guess everything happens for a reason. And I guess one thing that I didn't get to answer earlier is, for all of this cross-cultural and all of the skills that you basically take from one job to another, what advice can I give? And I really believe that wherever you go will leave a trace. So no task is too small. And I think I have always embraced that mentality. So I guess, I want to give that to you. And also look forward to staying in touch. Thank you.